Oh, all right then. If we really have to. Let's talk about sex. I mean, there's a war on. There's a real geopolitical shift that's taking place that is going to affect us all. The echoes and the consequences of the pandemic and the war that are going to be playing out for years. All sorts of things. Meanwhile, though, in the UK, a Member of Parliament watched porn on his phone and made headline news. And meanwhile, also in the UK, a female Member of Parliament was reportedly likened to Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct and made headline news. Generally, I ignore such stories because I take them as the background noise and chatter of politics, the nonsense that can easily be zoned out to better focus on the parts that are actually significant. But, and I say this extremely reluctantly, I think there is another part of the seismic shift that is touched upon here, part of the decline of the West theme. So let's do one of my short, quick response videos to explore it. Brace yourselves. The Conservative MP Neil Parish was, by all accounts, a perfectly good Member of Parliament, chair of, I think, a Common Select Committee on Agriculture, pictured here with a tractor. But he was seen watching porn on his mobile in the chamber of the House of Commons, and that is just stupid. Class A, zero brain cell stuff. And it would have been in any workplace. It's just not appropriate behaviour. You shouldn't need that to be pointed out to you. In most workplaces, you might have gotten a person taken to one side quietly. Maybe there would have been a disciplinary process. It should have been dealt with, robustly probably, but also probably discreetly. This being the world of politics, he apparently has to be held up as a moral reprobate and immediately thrown out. Now, I don't know him. I don't know if this is just an indicator of a deeper moral malaise and unsuitability for the job that he has, but it doesn't matter what I think. The immediate response was overwhelming, instant and irresistible. So that's an indicator of something in the terms of the society that we've become. Now, his friends gave a defence, which is that the first time it happened, he was actually looking for combine harvesters, specifically the Dominator combine harvester, and that naturally led him to trip innocently across a porn site. Really? Well, that's very exciting. Don't clutch your pearls too tightly, but let's see if we can reproduce that innocent search. Google, safe search off, let's try Dominator combine harvester. Seems to be a bunch of sites about Dominator combine harvesters. You would have to be extremely unlucky to miss all of these and accidentally hit porn instead. Well, what about the images? Nothing there has my pulse rate elevated so far. Your tastes may differ. Videos, all very agricultural. What about just Dominator? I mean, that's gotta be dodgy, right? Well, no. Some festivals, some computer game stuff, some motorbikes. I mean, I still think if you're a Member of Parliament in the chamber, you should be focused on your job there rather than looking at agricultural machinery. Or Cindy. Agricultural machinery is just her stage name. So, okay, man watches porn deliberately in the wrong place and comes up with a lame explanation, but then resigns anyway. Stupid, and he's paid the price. So what? So we are in this weird place right now where eroticism and sex is both frowned upon in a way that it hasn't been since the Victorian era, while at the same time as being ubiquitous and even sometimes celebrated. Now, how can it be both? How indeed? On the one hand, we seem to be entering into an age where new prudishness has reached oppressive levels. Any advertising featuring women in a sexually suggestive context likely to be banned for objectification. Unless, of course, they do it to themselves.
Make that pull-out game weak.
In which case they are expressing their power. Any sort of sexually suggestive banter is now considered to be harassment. Indeed, we heard last week that staring at a woman for too long undefined, on the underground was a form of harassment. Too bad if you believe in love at first sight. When your eyes meet across a crowded room, you won't know if that small smile is a sign of possible romance or whether she's wondering how much she can sue you for. At the same time as we have this sense of prohibition on what used to be normal behaviour, but to be fair, you involved all sorts of grey areas you had to navigate, and it wasn't always easy to do that, but it could still be fun, exciting, the stuff of life. We also now have a younger generation for whom the consumption of online porn has become the norm. Freely, instantly available, and the increase in men watching such content in public spaces, public transport and the like, is apparently now much more common than it ever was. In other words, Neil Parish has become just the most visible part of an increasing trend. Now, I have no stats to back this up, some anecdotal evidence, but my fear is that young people thinking that they're learning about sex by watching porn is really messing up a whole generation of young people. I mean, we do know from a multitude of studies that watching it a lot can be quite damaging to attitudes and to expectations, but I think it goes further. At least most older people learned what normal human relationships were or should be like before being surrounded by content that is often a freakish distortion of what healthy normal sex should be. Porn is to sex what, Marvel superhero movies are to violence, distorted in a way that's both exaggerated and also slightly sanitized at the same time. What does it do to young people to have that put in front of them as the tutorial in how to have a sex life? For girls, I'd rather expect that the norms of online porn would often be off-putting in the extreme. One study suggested that 88% of the most popular porn involved aggression towards the woman involved. For boys, they're being taught what they should or shouldn't like, being unaware that the standards being put in front of them are not good representations. Is this part of a reason why fewer young people are now in relationships and having sex than they used to be? I imagine the causes are multivariate, but this is certainly a likely contributor. No wonder young people are confused about a lot, particularly young men. They're in a society that's gone very sour on many standard expressions of male confidence. At the same time, they're given role models in porn that go well beyond confidence into aggression. And that's leading them to do badly in the view of society, probably to become unsuccessful when it comes to relationships. So ubiquitous, toxic role models on the one hand, wholly contradictory, emasculating models on the other. Is it any surprise then that you have the rise of a relatively toxic movement of so-called incels, involuntary celibates, who retreat into a downward spiral of despair and cynicism about the world? That movement probably started with the so-called pickup artist wave described by Neil Strauss in his famous book, The Game. You could look at the surface of that book and see what most critics did, a number of damaged young men who found ways to weaponize human nature to transform their success in getting shallow sexual encounters. Or you could see the other aspect, which was a group of men very actively trying to work out and document what were the rules of human attraction in a changing world. Yeah, in order to transform their success in getting shallow, etc., etc. But for me, the interesting part of all of that was where it ultimately took you, was that shy nerds could gain some success by faking confidence and faking being a man of substance, interested in more in the world than just getting together with a woman. But where Strauss ultimately ended up was the realisation that ultimately the better approach was to work on genuinely becoming that man, with all that confidence and that substance, interested in more than just getting together with women. One might think there was probably a more wholesome, direct route to that conclusion, but whatever. What you did see was a reflection that there was a gap between the emerging story about how this worked and what they found in practice by experimenting with different scripts and different approaches with how it actually worked. Ultimately, it came down to the fact that traditional male role models were still attractive to women. The way that they had to be expressed might have changed, but the dynamic was the same. I recall one of the more controversial but eloquent characters in this movement was challenged on a US TV show. The woman interviewer scornfully asked him, "So, you know what women want?" classic trap of a question, which he deftly avoided by answering, "I'm not interested in what women say they want, I'm interested in what they respond to." And there you had almost the scientific principle of what they were doing, testing out multiple approaches to find what did work, what didn't, what did women respond to. You also had the little undercurrent of contempt in that answer that hints at the dehumanising of your targets. And indeed, the movement normalised a rather powerful form of misogyny, an element that has unfortunately grown ever since. But once the initial leaders and thinkers on that had moved on, gotten bored, become too damaged to count, whatever it was, the movement that was left, the so-called manosphere, went into something of a downward spiral, and one of the offshoots of that is the incel movement. These are men who reportedly have accepted the division between the successful and the unsuccessful, and finding the effort to become the former too difficult or scary, they have sought to make a powerful identity out of becoming unsuccessful. So much so that they actually outgroup anyone amongst them who finds a girlfriend. They're a traitor to the cause. And they celebrate incels who go on to become mass shooters, killing some of the women who they've dehumanised in their imagination. And of course, with the role of social media, it's now become a lot easier to find and connect with other damaged people than it is to go out into the real world and meet actual people who might be good for your confidence and world outlook. So where has all that brought us? This cultural moment we've reached seems to be particularly self-destructive, and that surely can't stand because it runs against our instincts as human. What I've described isn't the only thing that's poisoning modern discourse. We've covered quite a few other things on this channel, but we've created a challenging time where good quality, confident men who know what they want to do in life, they can probably work out their space in this sort of out of balance reality they find themselves in, but large numbers of others are struggling to find confidence in a society that tells them that they are suspect, their natural desires are reprehensible, normal behaviours of the past are criminalised, they're expected to take all of that and somehow thrive in spite of it. Obviously, we know lots of young people particularly are failing to do that, and we've seen suicide rates, particularly amongst young men, climbing significantly in recent years. Psychiatrist Dr. Ziv Cohen said that what he was seeing in his own practice was one of the paradoxes of our age. It's seemingly so easy to connect with people who are like-minded, and yet there's a decrease in real intimacy. In our porn-desensitised world, where strong male role models are even banned from advertising as gender stereotypes, and what role models are left are not attractive to the opposite sex, it's not surprising that it's a confusing place. So we end up with stupid, dysfunctional behaviours, men watching porn in public. I mean, it's no less stupid and inappropriate. We all have to take responsibility for our actions, but it's a sort of passive-aggressive pushback against the world, an act of defiance against norms that don't fit, doesn't excuse it. This shouldn't be a surprise, but like all such gestures, it's not well calibrated with actually achieving good outcomes for yourself. Increasingly, we see also that the political movements that are founded on reactions against wokeism also often seek to restore the value of traditional sex roles, like the New Right movement around the likes of Peter Thiel and Curtis Yarvin that has started to become written about. It's one flavour of that anti-woke pushback, trying to find a way to take the energy of the Trump populist movement and strip out the Trumpian and the QAnon elements from it. And part of that theme is indeed the restoration of those sorts of traditional values, which is going to make those sorts of movements very seductive to a lot of people, particularly the ones that are being told constantly that they're too male, too white, too straight, whatever it may be. We very much need something that champions successful human values that is built on benign, long-lasting foundations, because right now the ones springing up are much more disruptive. I did a video some time ago about what are the ingredients for a mass political movement of the sort that the mid-20th century fascists and the communists built. The appeal of a movement in the early stages was towards damaged people who would welcome the discipline and the promise of a restoration of self-value and pride. That was one of the key features. Well, if you don't want a forest fire, maybe don't leave so much dry tinder lying around. Some of this can be dealt with by better preparing young people, and there have been some trials of teaching young people about the nature of porn at an age before they're likely to have been influenced by it. And there does seem to be at least some evidence that that sort of preparation helps to inoculate them from misunderstanding what this thing is. But ultimately, a society that's lost its moorings in relation to sex roles isn't well set up to teach children how to cope with the confusion. Not if they're the same schools that are showing them gender unicorns and telling them how there are now 33 genders or whatever it may be. Ultimately, we need adults to step up, re-establish what are sensible norms of behaviour again that will lead people to become a little more at ease with themselves and with their peers. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please share with anyone else you think would also enjoy it. Word of mouth is really important to us. And if you've not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? As the saying goes, that subscribe button won't smash itself.